We're talking a lot already about the economy, about entrepreneurship, about where companies like Telefónica can take us. And an inspiring moment yesterday at a meeting with Telefónica's COO, Jose Maria, saying Europe is back. And that is a message behind all of this, right? There are all of those companies. There is tremendous opportunity for creativity, for a different kind of society, a different kind of economy. I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is that underlying that, whether it's this economy or my country in Canada or anywhere in the world, is the need for a generation of people who have digital skills in their blood. Digital skills that are not just being able to read and consume and download a video, but to being able to make and shape the digital world around us. That's how you've gotten SoundCloud, that's how you've gotten Spotify, is those young people who have had digital skills in their blood. And so I want to talk about building a generation of what we call webmakers and talk about the idea that those digital skills really are a fourth literacy. If we think that we need reading, writing, and math in order to have a successful, productive society, we also need those digital skills. And that's not a side issue, it's something at the center of what we need in all of our societies. So that's what I want to talk about today. So, as Anne said, I'm Mark Surman from Mozilla, and I love the open web, as my business card says. And I'm very, very lucky. I'll tell you a bit about Mozilla because you may just know us from Firefox. And actually, how many people have used Firefox at one point in their life? Right, so you know us a little bit. And I'll tell you a bit of the story of why Firefox is special also, just quickly in here. But Mozilla is, as Anne says, a nonprofit. It has a nonprofit mission. And our mission is to guard the open nature of the internet. Now, how awesome is it to get up every day and have a job where my job is to help guard the open nature of the internet? But it's a great thing because it's a thing that built this economy, this digital economy we have now, it is an open market. It is a platform on anyone to build anything they can dream of. And Mozilla stands for making sure the internet stays that way. And the first project we started in 2003, was to keep the core building blocks of the web alive. And so I'll say a little bit more about what I mean by that, but it sounds very abstract, right? Keep the core building blocks of the web alive. Well, how we did that was by building a browser that millions of people around the world would love, and that was Firefox. So Firefox was actually itself a project in keeping the core building blocks of the web alive. And this is a little bit of a sense of the journey that we went on. It actually only takes us to 2009. But if you go back to 2002, the web was in a crappy place. Crappy place because that blue all represents IE6. And it's not just sad that it was Internet Explorer that everybody was using. It is. But what was sad is Microsoft had 98% of the market share of how people saw the internet. And what that meant is that the open standards that Tim Berners-Lee and CERN and the W3C put forward, which are the building blocks that have enabled the innovation and wealth creation of the internet, were now actually under one company's control, and they were changing them. And they were putting in their own building blocks. And the idea that the internet is a common platform that all of us can build on, like the road network, was starting to erode very quickly after its birth. And so the lack of competition in browsers actually put the internet at threat. And so then you see where we got in 2009. Not only do we have a lot of orange, which finally looks like a Firefox swirl, but we did not make this graph. And so by this point, Firefox has got, it looks like half the market. It's more like a third at that point. But we've got other browsers, Safari and Chrome, starting to emerge. And now, Microsoft's got less than 50% of the market. Again, nothing against Microsoft, but that diversity has brought us to a point where we have competition, but also those building blocks, the idea that anyone can build on the internet is actually safe again, at least on the desktop. Mobile's another story. And so this is the path that Firefox kind of went along in order to use market share, use as a nonprofit a great consumer product, to have the leverage and relevance to actually put out good web standards, which is what's baked inside of Firefox, and make sure that those web standards were relevant in the market, to the point that all those browsers now are built on the best open web standards, HTML5, which wasn't the case in 2002. And I'll talk a little bit more later about why that's important for innovation. But the other thing, just to make it a little grounded, if you go back to 2002 and you think about internet brands that you use today that you could have used then. Well, Wikipedia was around, but it wasn't actually until the mid-2000s, and really in many ways until Firefox had brought web standards back. For anybody who's geeky in the room, how many people in the room are geeky? Probably not very many. Okay, so for the geeky people in the room, we didn't have Ajax, but basically we didn't have interactive websites until Firefox comes and pushes the web along. Again, you didn't have Gmail, you didn't have Facebook, you didn't have Twitter. Those things wouldn't have existed in the way that they are now in that Internet Explorer monopoly world. So the real piece that Firefox helped usher in was, again, the freedom for companies like that to start, and then the idea of this HTML5. The web is a fully interactive programming language that can even be successful in creating mobile apps, which Firefox has helped to usher in as well. So the last piece, just to tell you about Firefox, and why I'm telling you this story, so you know a little bit about us, but then you can also know a little bit about our ambition for digital skills and why we think with all of you, we can move the ball in a very far and fast way, is that Firefox isn't just a company or a social enterprise that got to 500 million users through traditional marketing or traditional production techniques. How we got there was with community. And so this is a map of the Mozilla community that at the outside, and again it's a little out of date, has 400 million people using Firefox. Those people are an incredibly important resource for us because they're what make us relevant as a nonprofit in the market. They let us shape what web standards are. I mean, I can talk about that at length, but not here. Really is a way you shape how the web works is through a product like that. It's us, it's Apple, it's Google, it's Microsoft basically negotiating using our products. We shape how the web works by having those 400 million users. But more important, you've got layers and layers of volunteers. Those are the people still who make Firefox. And it was only because there were those many people who believed in the mission, keeping the web open, that what was in 2003 a company of 10 people literally took on Microsoft and won. And that is something that in this era, nobody could have imagined 20 years ago. You could start a nonprofit with 10 people, take on the biggest software company in the world, and bring back the web. And that's what the people who founded Mozilla did. Now it's a lot more people than that, 700 people, but still tens of thousands of volunteers. That's the model we use in order to kind of put these products out in the market and keep things relevant. And just to give away the story, that's the model we want to use with you to really drive this digital literacy agenda around the world. And so putting a face to a diagram, that's what the Mozilla community looks like. These are the very, very most best employees, the ones in the suits. And this is us at our second last big summit at Whistler in Canada. We're actually doing another summit this summer, which is actually going to be in Paris, Toronto, and San Francisco because it's so big now. It's a mix of our community and our staff. Those are the people who help save the web and who make Firefox. So changing the story to now and getting to web literacy. Now we've decided that with that mission, we need to move beyond the browser. And so, of course, we still make Firefox for the desktop. We've also, very much with the leadership and help of Telefónica, are moving to mobile phones with something called Firefox OS. And I won't go into detail there, but one could argue that we're in not that different a situation from 2002 with Google and Apple controlling the distribution of apps. You've got two companies who control all of the distribution in apps in the world. What HTML5 brings along is the idea that any web page can be an app. We could get to a point where you could text message an app to somebody. And it's that control over the distribution systems which is actually critical in breaking open if we want startups, if we want innovation, if we want the kind of economy we're talking about. So with Telefónica, Deutsche Telekom, and others, we're putting out a phone operating system which is just the web. And is based on that idea that it's easier to innovate and you can build apps just with the technologies of the web. But the third thing we're doing right now, and I'll talk about this in more detail because it's the topic of the day, is something called Mozilla Webmaker. And it's one contribution to this idea that we need all to be putting a push into a kind of global idea of web literacy or digital literacy as the fourth literacy. So I'll talk about it a little bit, but first let me unpack what do we mean Mozilla by web literacy. And first I have to talk about the web. So this is what the World Wide Web is made of. It's made of Lego blocks. It's not television, it's not a printed page, you can take it apart and put it back together and it's not that hard to understand. And so in order to explain that, I'm going to bring my son Ethan with me here virtually. He actually sometimes travels with me. He's 11. And Ethan loves Lego. He loves to make things with Lego. He likes that whole piece that I can take it apart, put it together. Sometimes he'll make the set by the diagrams that come with it, then he'll rip it apart. Later you'll never recognize what the thing was. It's lots of different things, and he understands and is intrigued by that ability to take apart, put back together, understand how the system works. He also loves the web a lot, probably even at this stage a little bit more than Lego. But the web he loves is very different, certainly in the world of television I grew up with, and maybe not the web that this group of people, because at least some of you are in my age bracket, experience every day. The web he loves is a lot more like this, right? How many people here know who this is? Just as a little, it's not bad, Psy got popular. So the few of you who don't, breakout Korean web star named Psy. And so one of Ethan's roles is like to bring Psy into the house, right? I wouldn't know who Psy was if I didn't have my kids saying like, this is hot right now, right? And this is mainstream media for Ethan. But what's important is, what's mainstream media also for Ethan is this, and this, and this, which is dozens of remixes of Psy. And immediately upon any internet phenomenon, like Psy, for all intents and purposes, he's like a mainstream rock star on internet, in the internet. But the long tail of Psy and the real mainstream media culture that our kids live in is actually just all of the remixes, all of the play, all of the making on top of this stuff. And that is very different than the economy, the culture, and the mediascape that almost all of us grew up in. That the mainstream is that amateurs remixing and playing on top of each other. And so Ethan's world is a world of remix. And so there's all kinds of implications for that. You may or may not think it's interesting. It's important that he lives there. But it's, I think, more important in terms of what we need to teach, to understand it's a remix by design that didn't happen by accident. Tim Berners-Lee, when he invented with others HTML, HTTP, the web at CERN, he wanted the world to work like Lego. He designed a system you could take apart and put back together. And right from the beginning, he designed a system that led to the ability to have Psy take over from the TV networks. Pretty huge social transformation that YouTube is bigger than any of our state television efforts and all of commercial television combined in many ways, certainly in terms of its cultural influence. But more importantly, he designed a system where even today with YouTube, I can go under the hood and see how that works. So that's the code of that web page. If I want to know how it works, I can go study it. It's built into the browser. It's built into the underlying technology that I can see how it works. And it's critical to how you got Mark Zuckerberg's, how you got Spotify's, this is a system that is common building blocks that everybody uses, that everyone can study how they work. And so that's both interesting from an innovation and platform perspective, but also interesting in terms of how do you get the skills? How did Mark Zuckerberg learn how to make Facebook? Because he could go in, easily study, see what others had done, and build from that. And in fact, often recycle many of the parts, which is a common theme on the internet. Google, Amazon, Facebook, they're all built on open source building blocks that are available for free, that power all of those servers and that are easy to study because that's how they work. So the web is designed to be like Lego, this powerful, ubiquitous force in our society. I want Ethan to understand that. I want all of our kids to understand that. I want every kid to understand that. And most importantly, I want him to know how it works. Because his opportunity, whether he's an engineer or a doctor or a creator is tied up in understanding how it works and being able to use it to his benefit and for his creativity. So that's what I mean by web literacy, is that we all understand that this is made of building blocks, that we can shape it, and how those building blocks work. So why does that matter? What's at stake? And this gets a little bit more into a nerdy, policy-ish kind of setup, although it's just the thin, top 40 hits version of it. So the thing that I would say as my tagline of why it matters is this is the fourth literacy we need to be considering. So we need to be considering that in our education systems. We need to be considering that in how we look at employers. We need to be employees. We need to be considering it in how we up-level our employees. Whatever it is, it's really something we need to start to define and think about as a core understanding for all of society, not just for geeks, not just for engineers. And what's interesting is there's demand for that. In a survey we did with some of our partners in the room in the UK, just recently, 67% of British children aged 8 to 15 say they are interested in learning how to code. 3% say they know. So this is not a thing where we're saying, hey, everybody, here's some medicine, take it. Young people know, and there's some research that will come out soon from Telefónica, young people know that knowing how this works is the path to economic opportunity. Knowing how this works is a path out of university into a career. Knowing how this works is the way to get startups. Knowing how this works is a way to have a fun, creative, interesting job. But we're crap at teaching it in any meaningful way. And so, that's something that is starting to get recognized and I think is in policy debates around the world. This is Ed Vaizey, but we often also hear the same stuff from Michael Gove, two British ministers who've really pushed this on the policy agenda there, saying even a basic understanding of computer coding will help you understand the structure of your digital life. So the structure of your digital life, not how to become an engineer. How to live and create and be in your life. That's now on the policy agenda in the UK, increasingly in the US. I think what Anne wants to lead as a conversation here is getting that conversation going in Brussels, that this is a mainstream central thing to how we all need to operate in life. And of course, Nesta, who's represented here by Kate, and others came out with an economic view on this set of digital skills a couple of years ago called the Next Gen Report, showing that at least in the UK, but I think it's true in most Western nations, we're well behind in having those skills available in our economy to the degree we need them for productivity and economic growth. But I think the most important point, this is in a report Nesta just came out with, and it's underlying my argument of how to move fast on this stuff, is that we should give every person these experiences of making digital products rather than using them. So there's some things in that are really important. Learning by being able to make stuff and not just being able to consume stuff. Building a society, a digital society where we are all potentially creators and not just consumers of content. But the key phrase in that quote is every young person. It's not computer science as an elective credit. It's not just for engineers. This is a literacy we want everybody to have. And I'm going to get into my last 2 points now. And one of them is the leverage is that 56% of internet users already create and curate content online. Huge numbers of kids now have smartphones. We don't have a problem that people aren't interested in using this stuff. We have a problem that they do not understand the full power of what's in their hands. They don't understand how to shape it and turn it into economic opportunity. That's an awesome starting point, right? Let's take stuff that people, including young people, love. Let's make it more powerful for them. And let's do that in a way that drives creativity in our economies. That shouldn't be hard. So, if it's not hard, how do we take that springboard and use it for widespread web literacy? What I'll talk a little bit about is Mozilla's answer to that, but it is something we need all of you enlisted in. And so our answer builds actually off of this connected learning theory that got mentioned in the title. Mimi Ito from UC Irvine talks about something called connected learning, which includes the idea that the internet can help youth develop knowledge, expertise, skills, and important new literacies, and that the internet is actually the place to go and learn this stuff. Not the internet alone, not the internet sitting alone, because she talks a lot about how we use the internet socially, especially young people use the internet socially, sitting around computers. And not by studying the internet, but going and using it and making things with it. And that is the core difference to sort of what we think is got to happen. Is this is not about teaching code on a chalkboard. It's about getting out there and inviting kids to make things, to code, to make video, and all those things, and to do it not just in school. Schools are important, but not only in schools. And so we've launched something called Mozilla Webmaker. This is the new version that'll come out in about a month, which really is just about inviting people to come in and make things using code on the web. All kinds of different things, videos, web pages, little apps. And if you kind of pop this part out, you'll see that we've got a set of tools that we're starting to put out there: popcorn maker, thimble, X-ray goggles, which are about just playing with different aspects of the web. But really, all of these tools bring us sort of this very innocuous version of the hacker ethic, which is I can take things apart, I can understand how they work, and I can play with them again. And I don't have a good screen capture of the X-ray goggles, which is the key tool in that. So Jeff will have to demonstrate it later. But a lot of it is really simple stuff where I go to edit a meme so I could make that beaver or whatever he is funnier by changing that. But I'd have to actually see how the code works to do that. But I might want to do that, make it funny, share it with my friends. Changing it pushes me into the code. Similarly, I'm not going to give you the best screen cap on this. We have videos where you can go and make fun of movie characters like Edward from Twilight, but get into the code to do it and pass those things around. So the theme in all of those things really is, and actually we also are working on things to move that same spirit to mobile, where if you're in an app, you're experiencing something on mobile, take it apart, open the hood, hack it. But the idea in all of what we're doing, and we are just going to be a drop in the bucket, is that if we want to move tens of millions of people from being users on the web to making the web, we need to just get them in there, get their fingers dirty with the code, with the image files. It's just about inviting people to be hands-on, play with this stuff, and make something new. And there's lots of different people doing that. There's lots of ways to do it. We just need to call that out as an approach, as an agenda. And that goes to my last point, and I know, Anne, I'm a little over time, which is we need some sort of approach which is a global movement pushing this agenda. Not just tech companies like Telefónica and Mozilla, not just grassroots groups like Freeformers who you'll hear from today, not just policymakers like many of you in the room, but all of that. We all need to be looking at this mainstream web literacy concept and looking at that it's in school and out of school and hands-on in terms of how we drive and raise the bar on these skills. And the way that I actually think about it, and I'll talk about some things that are happening right now as well to close, is it starts in some ways just with individuals teaching each other, individuals playing with each other on this stuff. It's not a big deal. It's not a big effort. This is a part of an event we did last summer where we just threw together an invitation for people to teach each other the web. We ended up having 700 events in 80 cities in 2 months, just with people sitting down and saying, let me show you how this stuff works. And we're going to do that again this summer. And it's not that different than something like scouting, where we think about, if you think about scouting, it's something kind of mainstream right now. It is actually about learning a set of skills. But at the time, when Baden-Powell founded it, it was kind of had some radical ideas, and it seemed nobody would have thought it would have become as big as it was. And what do you think was one of the big kind of social innovations that Baden-Powell used, that scouting used to bring some of its values forward that didn't exist before? Any guesses? Guy, I think, knows the answer. So if that's true, he can't. Let's see, anybody who wants to guess who's not Guy, then Guy gets to guess. Glenn knows the answer. Okay, Guy can guess. No. Also badges. Tents is closer, although there were tents before. Civilian camping. And so here's this interesting thing, which is how many people have gone camping before in this room, right? And 125 years ago, the hens would not have gone out. We were urban dwellers or rural dwellers. The people who camped were the military or prospectors looking for gold. And it was a very technical, arcane, difficult activity. Nobody would camp. Why would you camp? You got to carry all this stuff. You got to set up this fancy tent. Kind of sounds like coding today, right? It's an arcane technical activity. People don't do it for leisure. Sounds complicated. It's not. And it also can be fun and certainly can connect you to something that is bigger than yourself. Nature, in the case of camping, but the web in the case of coding. And so I actually take a lot of inspiration from the fact that, based on that idea that didn't exist 100 years ago, Scouting, with very little resources, has been able to build a 40 million person or youth strong organization that exists everywhere in the world. And it both carries those skills with it and a culture of independence, a culture of survival, a culture of appreciating nature. And what I think we need to do is exactly that same thing, with Mozilla as one piece of it, now for web literacy. Is we need to look at a movement that's about the skills, the confidence, the fun of connecting to the web, to the digital world. That actually is the way, with schools also, but is the way faster than through schools we can raise this bar, which is going to drive competition in Europe, which is going to drive startups, which is going to actually help people actually enjoy their lives. So last year, one thing we did was try this summer code party event, which, as I said, was just people teaching each other the web. We had the 700 events around the world. There's the actual stats, and Europe actually was heavier than I think in this map. It's not quite the right map. And so what those were was just people getting together, having some fun. Here's one that happened in Taiwan. Some are teaching each other code, some are making dinosaurs dance. All kinds of things happen at these events. And these events actually embedded in partner programs. And so here's a thought shot from a Think Big Schools event we did with Telefónica. That wasn't Mozilla, that was Telefónica taking some of that Webmaker stuff and bringing it out into its constituencies. So that's how we imagine this gets big, is that you all somehow are connected, whether it's through your governments, through your own organizations, to networks that can be a part of this movement. Whether you're teaching it with your own style, which Guy's going to talk about Freeformers does, or can pick up stuff that others like MIT or Mozilla are doing, which is what's happening with what Telefónica is doing. There's a way to do this simply. And the next step is to do that simply this summer. And so we've brought back the Summer Code Party as Maker Party this year globally, although it's a big campaign in the US. We launched it with Obama about 2 weeks ago at the White House. And so that's a big push with about 40 different partner organizations and a much more ambitious kind of push than last year. But it's all pushing this idea of making in the digital world. And then in the UK in particular, with Nesta, Nominet, Telefonica, and others, we're about to launch, with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, am I allowed to say that, on May 30th, something called Make Things Do Stuff, a similar campaign, UK organizations pushing this making and learning agenda. And what's amazing is it really is a big tent of the tidal wave of organizations committed to doing this work. And so I highlight those both because you should know about them. And the Maker Party one is a global campaign, and if you know people you can plug into it, do talk to me or Kat or Jeff, who's here from Mozilla. But the more important reason I tell you this stuff is lots of different things are happening. The tidal wave is rising on this. The tidal wave is rising in DC, in London, around the world. And it's amongst policymakers, it's amongst grassroots organizations, it's amongst companies. Everybody is seeing that pushing this digital skills agenda, seeing it as a fourth literacy, and just getting people making things is something that not only we have to do right now, we can do now, and it's easy and it's fun. And so, that's the conversation today. And I don't know how many rooms like this in Brussels, the topic is let's do something easy and fun. But that's the idea for the day. So thanks very much.